My first question. Last time I spoke to your team and said, how can I bring you more investors? You said, we stopped taking investors. Who in the world says no? You're the only person in the entire country that says, sorry, we're not taking it. So what's been going on since I last spoke to you? That's an extraordinary position that you're in. Tell me all.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we haven't gone off the rails. It's part of an intentional approach that, we've been kind of developing over the years. But I think it really goes back to how Alpha started. It was a group of us who were all pretty busy working professionals and investors. We wanted to deploy capital into, institutional quality real estate. And at that point in time, before the Jobs Act, before crowdfunding, before like all this access, it was a really hard thing to do, especially if you were an individual that wasn't writing 7-figure checks into transactions, right? And we know that to be true because when you look at the data, if you outside the 1%, top 1% of earners, the percentage of real estate in any given person's portfolio, like effectively rounded to zero when you exclude the value of the primary residence, right? And so it was a hard thing to access. And we wanted to create something that felt like an optimized investor experience for us, right? And, we set out and, of course, trials and tribulations and things we learned and things we did wrong, but we set out to build something that, we could access as individuals and get into institutional quality private real estate deals. And I think over time, you get to a point where you have to make a decision about which direction do you want to go, right? And for us, the idea of having tens of thousands of investors fundamentally changes the core values upon which we kind of built this company, right? And now we have to acknowledge, of course, that having more investors or investors that are deploying more capital is a valuable thing, right? But we also want to be able to develop real relationships with the people in our network, right? Everyone who's part of Alpha has spoken to one of the principals of the firm, has multiple points of contact. And I don't want to say I'm best friends with everyone in the network, but we know everyone, well enough to understand what their real estate goals are, what they do, what they actually care about. And they know enough about us to understand what our strategy is, what they should expect to see from us, how everything works, et cetera. And so that's a really important, I think, part of this whole thing. And then, in practice, what you have to also appreciate is that the type of operating partner that we're trying to work with, they, in a vacuum, do not need us to raise capital, right? Like they have billion-dollar plus portfolios. They've done it before. If they've performed well, which they have, if we're talking to them, they can raise equity capital. And so that's not the type of group that's interested in blasting their deal out to tens of thousands of people, right? And so part of the way that we kind of improve or keep a high quality partner within Alpha is by keeping this small network. And we arbitrarily decided that was 1,000 people. And, we'll see if that ends up being the case. I think we're at about 850 active investors in the network right now. And so we are letting people into Alpha still. It's just on a very selective basis. And the reason why, the reason why that's important, because I do want to clarify, the reason that's an important part of this thing is that the SEC 99 investor rule, right? That limits the number of people we can bring into, most of our offers.
Are these
right?
506Bs then that you're investing, not Cs?
They are. Everyone goes through a pretty comprehensive onboarding process before they join up with Alpha, right? And so because that's the case, and there is demonstrable value in being the majority equity partner in a deal, or at least being a recurring larger equity partner. And that might mean being able to negotiate better investment terms. It might mean just a right of first refusal on X or priority access to new deals, what have you. There is value to that. And so the people we're letting into the network today have, the ability to write 6-figure checks, multiple times a year. That benefits the entire network. And what it doesn't do, because we have a ceiling, is create undue competition for equity, right? Because you know how it goes. You have a new project, everyone wants to get in. I don't ever want to have to make the call or send the email saying, hey, sir or ma'am, I know you wanted to come into this deal, but we just don't have room for you, right? We want to make sure the people who are part of Alpha from the very beginning, the people who really put their trust into us before we had built the track record we have today, they still get access to our deals and they're not getting pushed out. And so that's a really long way of saying, it was intentional. I know it sounds crazy. When we talk about it as a team, we oftentimes like joke, like, what are we doing here? Right. And maybe it's a long con on us where we tell everyone we don't want investors, and then, we get a ton more, because that's effectively what's been happening, unfortunately. But it is true. We're trying to keep things at a scale that we think makes sense for the folks in the network today.